Ethan Caldwell stands before an entire wall of windows, staring out at the landscape as if searching for something the city no longer has to offer. At 38, he is the CEO of NorthMed, one of the largest medical corporations in Canada, a company he helped build with surgical precision, flawless numbers, and decisions that never wavered. An empire founded on control, performance, and predictability. October in Toronto has its own sound, the rustling of golden leaves under hurried footsteps, the whisper of cold wind between skyscrapers, the echo of a city that never stops, but sometimes feels frozen in time. It's late afternoon. The city pulses below, but 52 floors up, in a mirrored glass tower, the world seems to move in slow motion. But now, even before a cinematic sunset painting Lake Ontario in copper and violet, his eyes don't shine. The phone vibrates on the desk, maybe a notification, maybe an urgent email, maybe another postponed meeting. He ignores it. Inside that silent, sterile office, Ethan reviews a financial report, as he's done hundreds of times. Profits have risen, partnerships secured, goals exceeded. But there's no satisfaction, just silence, just the feeling that everything is still. A picture of flawless success on the outside, but inside, a void with no name, just a space. A space he won't even admit out loud, but one that's been there ever since his ex, Victoria, left. There was no drama, just silence. The kind of ending that doesn't scream, but leaves echoes in every corner of life. Since then, Ethan moved on, or at least pretended to. He buried himself in work, automated his days, turned his heart into yet another department to manage, everything under control, or almost. On an ordinary late afternoon, something unexpected happens. The phone rings, not vibrates, not a text alert. It actually rings, like it used to. And the name on the screen isn't an investor, an assistant, or someone from the board. It's Julian. Julian, an old friend from their University of Toronto days. They studied medicine together, though Ethan left the white coats behind for the corporate world before even finishing his residency. Julian, on the other hand, became a cardiologist, married, 3 kids, domestic chaos, and the same sharp sense of humor. They don't talk much these days, but whenever they do, something always shifts. Julian has that annoying gift of dismantling Ethan's facade with 2 sentences and a mocking laugh. And this time is no different. You're going to hate me, but I need a favor. A date. Tonight. I can't make it. Long story. But before you hang up, listen. She's smart, sarcastic, and different. The kind you need to meet. Ethan sighs. It's not the kind of request he wants to hear, especially from Julian, who always believes in coincidences disguised as destiny. A blind date? Ethan, the rational CEO with a meticulously timed schedule, couldn't possibly accept such a proposal, but Julian insists. And for some reason he can't quite explain. Maybe the sincerity in his friend's voice, maybe the uncomfortable silence in his own heart. Ethan doesn't say no, and hangs up the phone. He looks at his reflection in the glass. Flawless suit, composed expression, calculating eyes. But there's something there, deep down, barely visible, a crack. Outside, the wind blows harder, and Ethan, without knowing it yet, has just said yes to the one thing that can't be predicted: chance. And that's how it all begins. Subscribe to the channel and help us grow. Like, comment, and share. This really supports us and motivates us to keep bringing you more enchanting stories. The next day, Toronto wakes under a sky of dense clouds, as if the city itself were holding its breath, waiting for some unexpected turn of events. Ethan Caldwell strides through the NorthMed headquarters lobby with determined steps and eyes fixed on his phone screen. He's still trying to understand exactly how he let Julian talk him into agreeing to a blind date. A CEO doesn't get involved in improvised situations. He delegates, plans, anticipates. But now, for some reason he hasn't yet verbalized, there's a name and a time scribbled in the corner of his mind. Olivia. Tonight. The thought still bothers him. There's something deeply unsettling about stepping into a scenario without control, without a briefing, without guarantees. Ethan moves through his day trying to forget. 3 meetings, a corporate lunch, a call with shareholders in Vancouver. But between one commitment and the next, stray thoughts cross his mind. What if it's unbearable? What if it's awkward? What if it's nothing at all? By late afternoon, when the city is already bathed in end-of-day lights and the typical Friday traffic, Julian sends a voice message. Relax. She doesn't bite. And please, try not to act like a robot. Ethan rolls his eyes, but something stirs inside him. A faint spark of curiosity, maybe? Or perhaps the loneliness poorly hidden beneath layers of productivity. He heads home, takes a shower, hesitates between 2 suits, something between casual and formal. He settles on a dark gray blazer without a tie. In the mirror, he adjusts his shirt cuffs and stares at his reflection with silent skepticism. "What are you doing, Caldwell?" he murmurs before heading out the door. The taxi drops him in front of a small French restaurant in Yorkville, a refined and charming neighborhood, naturally chosen by Julian. Ethan arrives 10 minutes early, out of reflex. He orders a glass of wine and watches the couples around him. Laughter, hands entwined, light conversation. He feels like an outsider in this world of spontaneous connection. He takes his phone from his pocket, considering texting Julian to say he's done, that he's leaving, but before he can, the phone rings. An unknown number. He answers. "Hi, are you the one filling in for Julian?" says a woman's voice, slightly sarcastic. "That depends. Are you the one who was supposed to be having dinner with him?" "That's me." "Look, I'm 5 minutes away, but there's a taxi blocking the entrance and the driver's arguing with a cyclist, Toronto being Toronto." Ethan smiles for the first time that day, involuntarily. Her voice has an energy that's hard to ignore. "I'll wait for you outside," he says, and hangs up. He steps out of the restaurant, and the moment his feet touch the sidewalk, he sees her. Hair loosely tied up, navy wool coat, and an expression that mixes comic irritation with urban impatience. One hand in her pocket, the other gesturing as she talks to the driver, more amused by the situation than actually upset. When she sees him, she raises an eyebrow and says loud enough for him to hear, "You're the CEO who thought dinner with me would be less risky than a corporate merger?" He takes a second to respond, caught off guard. "And you're the pediatrician who thinks confronting drivers is a valid form of social warm-up?" Olivia smiles. A wide, spontaneous, almost disarming smile. Ethan just watches. She doesn't seem to fit into any category he knows. And strangely, that doesn't scare him. For the first time in a long time, he feels that maybe, just maybe, something unpredictable is exactly what he's been missing. He extends his arm, as if inviting her into a game whose rules he hasn't yet learned. "Shall we have dinner?" And so, they enter. Yorkville at night has a glow of its own. The streetlights reflect off the damp sidewalks from the recent drizzle, and elegant shop windows cast golden beams onto the narrow streets. Ethan and Olivia walk side by side to the restaurant's entrance, but a visible distance remains between them, not physical, but of worlds, of rhythms, of perspectives. Still, there's something in the air drawing them closer, something that can't be ignored. A quiet curiosity. The maitre d' leads them to a table in the corner, away from the main bustle. The ambiance is elegant, yet intimate. Stone walls, small candles on the tables, crystal glasses. Olivia removes her coat and thanks him with a light smile. Ethan pulls out her chair with the kind of automated politeness that comes from living within social protocols. But Olivia doesn't seem impressed, not in the conventional sense at least. "Are you always this polite?" she asks teasingly. Ethan raises an eyebrow. "Are you always this direct?" She smiles again, this time with a sparkle in her eyes. "Always." The waiter arrives, presents the menu, recommends the house wine. Ethan listens, nods, but notices Olivia is more interested in the people around them than in the wine list. She comments, in a quiet voice, about a couple who seem to be on their first date, and about an older woman dining alone, reading a book. Ethan observes, intrigued. He's used to dates where people talk about themselves, their achievements, their projects. Olivia watches the world, She listens without hurry, as if she's reading between the lines. The food arrives, and dinner begins. At first, there's the inevitable formality. Where did you grow up? Why did you choose medicine? How did you end up at NorthMed? Ethan answers with carefully crafted phrases, as if he's in an interview. But Olivia laughs openly when he tries to impress her with numbers or corporate awards. You talk about your company like it's a production line of efficiency. But where are the people in that equation? She asks, not with malice, just with sincere curiosity. Ethan stays silent for a moment longer than he'd like. No one ever asks him that kind of question. She speaks like a doctor, like someone who sees every day what's left when the system's gears don't turn as they should. Ethan listens, and for the first time in a long while, he doesn't have a ready answer. But the atmosphere doesn't turn heavy. On the contrary. Olivia shifts the subject with ease, as if she'd simply tossed a pebble into a lake to see how far the ripples would go. She begins telling hospital stories, a child who asked for chocolate-flavored anesthesia, a resident who fainted during suturing. Her stories are filled with humor, tenderness, and an enchanting rhythm. Ethan finds himself laughing, truly laughing. Not the diplomatic chuckle of meetings or business dinners. It's a laugh that starts slow and then takes over. He relaxes his shoulders, looks at her with renewed attention. You turn an ordinary day into a movie script, he comments. Maybe because, to me, every day is kind of cinematic, she replies. People being born, people dying, people just trying to make it. It's all so dramatic and beautiful at the same time. Ethan stares at her, silent for a beat. He realizes Olivia isn't just charismatic. She's intense, vibrant, real. A stark contrast to the rigid world he's built around himself. In that quiet restaurant, between a glass of wine and the main course, something happens. It's not love at first sight. It's something rarer, immediate respect, genuine fascination, and the seed of a transformation without a name. Time slips by unnoticed. The dinner he expected to be a timed social obligation now stretches effortlessly. Outside, the Toronto night remains cold and damp, but inside the restaurant there's warmth. Not the artificial warmth of candles or freshly served food, but something subtler. The feeling of being exactly where you're supposed to be, even if you don't know why. Olivia takes a sip of wine and drops another unexpected comment, funny and insightful at the same time. She has a gift for cutting to the core with grace and lightness, saying what everyone thinks but no one dares to voice. Ethan, used to environments where everything is guarded and calculated, finds himself laughing again, and this time, freely. For the first time in months, maybe years, he's not trying to impress anyone. He's not performing. He's simply present. So tell me, Olivia says, leaning forward slightly. When did you decide to stop being a doctor and become a mogul? Ethan rests his elbows on the table, scratches his chin for a second, and answers honestly. It was during my 4th year of med school. I took a class on hospital administration and realized there was something there, an invisible mechanism that moved everything. I thought, maybe I can't change the world one hospital bed at a time, but I can change how those beds are managed. And did you? She asks with a steady gaze, not accusatory, just searching. Maybe. The system is slow, but we've grown, expanded coverage, secured resources. And the patients? Do they feel that? The question hangs in the air for a second. Ethan doesn't answer right away, not because he doesn't know, but because he's never really stopped to think about it. At least not like this. I hope so, he says finally. But I know we're far from ideal. Olivia simply nods. She doesn't argue. She listens. And that disarms him more than any confrontation could. Because it's in that reflective silence that depth lives. Then she shares her own story. Daughter of a teacher and an electrician, grew up in Ottawa, studied on scholarships, fought to get where she is. She works in the public healthcare system, deals with overcrowded hospitals, and whenever she can, volunteers in indigenous communities in the north. She speaks about it all naturally, not with heroism, but with conviction. Sometimes I feel like we're not saving anyone, she confesses. Just holding back the chaos until the next shift. But still, you keep going, Ethan says respectfully. Of course. Because sometimes it's in the middle of the chaos that you find what really matters. The waiter interrupts to offer dessert, and Olivia asks for something with chocolate. Ethan, already surrendered to the relaxed tone of the night, asks for the same. When dessert arrives, the conversation becomes lighter again. They talk about childhood movies, unfinished books, trips that went wrong and became unforgettable stories. Olivia mimics accents, describes patience with comedic affection, and somewhere along the night, Ethan realizes he hasn't checked the time once. There's a pause. The kind that doesn't create discomfort, but marks something. Olivia looks at him with calm eyes, as if she's not evaluating the man in front of her, but everything he hasn't said. And then, with a smile that's almost teasing, she says, "You're more interesting than you look, Ethan Caldwell, a CEO with the soul of an observer. Who knew?" He smiles, tilts his head slightly, and replies, "And you're more complex than I imagined. A pediatrician with the heart of a revolutionary." She laughs. When they leave the restaurant, the night feels a little less cold. They walk for a few blocks in silence, side by side. No promises, no plans. Just the clear sense that something has been awakened. And without knowing it, neither of them is quite the same anymore. Monday arrives with its usual relentless pace. Ethan dives back into his routine as if nothing had happened. Meetings, reports, tight schedules, strategic decisions. But even buried in the life of a CEO, something is different about him. A subtle detail in his movements, a slight delay when signing documents, a distraction that wasn't there before. The memory of the dinner with Olivia still lingers, not as an unusual episode, but as something that, strangely, left a mark. By late afternoon, he finds himself standing in front of his office window, staring at the Toronto skyline with a cup of coffee in hand. The sky is gray, the streets busy, everything as usual. But inside him, one question keeps pounding. What exactly are we building here? Ethan has always been pragmatic. Everything he's done in life had purpose, logic, return. Growing NorthMed was a matter of personal mission and legacy. But after hearing Olivia speak about inequality in the healthcare system with such honesty and passion, a kind of static began to hum in the back of his mind, a noise he can no longer ignore. During a board meeting, an executive presents a new expansion plan for private clinics in high-income urban areas. The proposal is profitable, scalable, backed by data. Everyone at the table seems pleased, everyone except Ethan. He flips through the presentation, but something feels wrong. Olivia's words echo in his mind. Do the patients feel it? He looks at the charts and sees no people, only margins, metrics, numbers. What about the North? He asks, interrupting the presentation. Indigenous communities, underserved territories, any plans for those regions? The room falls silent. One of the directors responds vaguely. Those areas are logistically more complex, with slower returns. We can consider them in the medium term, maybe through public partnerships, but the answer doesn't satisfy him. For the first time, Ethan feels the coldness of it all. Not because he didn't know before, but because now he feels it. Later that night, back home, he rereads an old article Olivia mentioned during dinner, a piece about volunteer doctors in Nunavut dealing with a lack of equipment, basic medication, and infrastructure. He sees photos of children wrapped in colorful blankets, fragile smiles, nurses with deep eye bags, a reality that never touched his agenda, but now knocks at his door. He sends Olivia a message. Something simple. I read about your work in Nunavut. I'd like to talk more about it. She replies soon after. Of course, it's a different world, but it's the same country, isn't it? On Wednesday, they meet again. Nothing formal. Just coffee in Kensington Market, among fruit stands, spice aromas, and street artists. Olivia wears a loose coat and worn-out boots. He, a dark overcoat and wool scarf. A clear contrast, and yet nothing seems out of place.
She talks about her trips north, the harsh conditions, the kids with chronic bronchitis, the women who walk for hours to get care. She speaks firmly, without self-pity, like someone who has seen too much and still chooses to keep seeing. Ethan listens. Closely. He asks questions. He takes mental notes. For the first time, he's not trying to understand in order to optimize. He's trying to truly understand.
"Have you ever thought about going there?" she asks, unexpectedly. He hesitates. He's never been north, never considered stepping outside the safe radius of the city, contracts, glass towers. "Maybe it's time," he says. She just smiles. Back at the office, Ethan picks up one of NorthMed's social impact reports. For the first time, he truly reads it, line by line. And when he closes the folder, something is decided, even if he doesn't yet know what will come next. In that moment, the transformation begins. Not with a grand decision, but with a persistent, sincere doubt. Are we really making a difference? The night of NorthMed's annual gala arrives, wrapped in carefully constructed expectations and appearances. The event takes place at the Royal Ontario Museum, one of Toronto's most imposing buildings, a fusion of classical and contemporary architecture that perfectly reflects the image NorthMed wants to project. Tradition with innovation, power with sophistication. Important guests circulate through marble corridors, flutes of champagne in hand, long dresses, black ties. A stage has been set under soft blue lighting, and in the background, the colossal skeleton of a dinosaur silently watches over the night's grandeur. Ethan arrives on time, as always. His suit is tailored, his smile reserved, his posture impeccable. He greets directors, ministers, and investors with that perfect balance of cordiality and professional distance that has earned him both admiration and fear in the corporate world. But tonight, something in his gaze is different. He scans the room with a sense of inner detachment, as if none of this is quite enough anymore. Olivia arrives shortly after. She wears a simple dark blue dress that contrasts with the surrounding opulence, yet she doesn't seem out of place. Quite the opposite. She moves among the guests with serene confidence, and when she smiles, and she does often, she seems to light up the corners untouched by the event's spotlight. Ethan walks toward her. When he sees her, the noise around him seems to pause just for a moment. She holds a small envelope, the formal invitation, and makes a subtle joke about the dress code. "It's all very corporately festive," she says with dry humor. "And you're defiantly off script," he replies with a glint in his eye. Not long after, the speeches begin. The MC steps onto the stage and starts the institutional tributes, company achievements, expansion milestones, partner acknowledgements. Nothing unexpected. Until suddenly, a name is announced with a different kind of emphasis. Dr. Olivia Grant. Ethan turns to look at her. She blinks, confused. The name is said again. This year, we want to recognize a professional who embodies the spirit of humanitarian medicine. Someone who, with limited resources, has brought healthcare to remote regions of the country, working voluntarily in Indigenous communities in northern Canada. Olivia freezes for a moment. Ethan watches her, surprised. He didn't know about the tribute, and neither did she. They call her name again. Hesitantly, she walks to the stage. Applause fills the room. She's clearly caught off guard. She receives a symbolic plaque and, standing at the microphone, takes a deep breath. She could say a lot, but she chooses simplicity. "I don't know if I deserve this. What I do, many others do, in silence. The truth is, where I work, there's no stage. There's no spotlight. There is pain. There is resistance. And there are people who need to be seen, who are not numbers, and who are still waiting for a system that works for everyone." The room falls silent, not uncomfortably, but with weight. Her words cut with the delicacy of someone who doesn't want to offend, but refuses to lie. Ethan swallows hard. He feels something shift inside, something he can't name just yet. A discomfort, a raw admiration, a guilt that isn't entirely his but one he recognizes. At the end of the speech, the applause returns, less automatic, more human. Olivia steps down from the stage. Ethan meets her on the way back. She smiles, slightly embarrassed. He says nothing. He just looks at her for a few seconds, as if trying to memorize the moment. And then, in an almost involuntary gesture, he reaches out and touches her hand, not to congratulate her, but to be present, to say without words, "I saw, I heard, I understood." And in that quiet gesture, the emotion he'd been avoiding for years begins to surface. Because in that hall filled with success, it was Olivia's truth that moved him like nothing else had in a very, very long time. The gala night moves forward. The formality starts to dissolve into looser conversations, moderate laughter, and champagne flutes traded for red wine. The atmosphere becomes less institutional, more social. But for Ethan, something remains suspended in the air, a feeling hard to define. He watches Olivia being approached by strangers, some sincere, others not so much. She thanks them naturally, but seems a bit out of place in that world of bureaucratic compliments and hollow smiles. Ethan, standing a few meters away, follows her with his eyes, feeling a strange mix of pride and unease. And that's when a familiar voice approaches from behind, carrying a scent he knows well, and doesn't miss. Victoria Lang. She appears like a ghost from the past, flawlessly dressed in a black silk gown, hair tied with surgical precision, makeup impeccable. She greets Ethan with a calculated smile, the kind that speaks more of intention than feeling. He returns it politely, with a slight nod. "I saw your name on the guest list. Figured you'd be here," she says, as if commenting on something inevitable. "It's the gala for the company I run, Victoria." "Of course I'd be here," he replies, with a half smile, almost impatient. She pretends not to notice his tone. "And that?" she asks, subtly tilting her chin toward Olivia, who's chatting with a younger doctor across the room. Olivia. "She works in public health care," Ethan answers, curt. "Public health?" Victoria repeats as if digesting something absurd. "Pediatrician, right?" I saw she was honored. What a curious speech. So raw. Ethan crosses his arms, still not looking directly at her. It was honest. Honesty is a rare virtue, but sometimes it lacks elegance, she says, with that condescending smile he knows all too well. She's different. Not exactly your type. Or maybe you're in a more alternative phase. The words hang in the air like subtle poison. It's enough. Ethan turns, facing Victoria firmly. His eyes, always controlled, now carry something she doesn't recognize. Conviction. Not fleeting irritation, not social discomfort, but a clear line being drawn. "Olivia has more courage than anyone in this room," he says slowly. "She doesn't hide behind empty speeches or live for image. She works where no one wants to work, faces what no one wants to see, and says truths no one else dares to speak." Victoria takes a step back, surprised. For a moment, she loses her composure. She had never seen him like this, not during arguments, not even when they broke up. Ethan had always been diplomatic, cold, restrained, but now there's something raw in his voice, something new. It's not about phases or alternatives. It's about finally seeing what really matters, he continues, calmer now, but resolute. "And you know what else? For the first time in a long while, I'm exactly where I want to be, and with who I want to be." Victoria tries to recover her smile, but it no longer finds a place. She simply thanks him for the meeting with a mechanical nod and walks away. Ethan takes a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline slowly fade. He turns and walks toward Olivia, who notices him approaching with a curious, questioning gaze. "Everything okay?" she asks. He hesitates for a second, then smiles. Not a social smile, not a polite one. A real smile, one that starts in the eyes. Now it is. Olivia doesn't need explanations. She reads everything in his expression. Then, without saying a word, she leans her shoulder gently against his, as if sealing a silent pact. In that moment, something shifts for good. It wasn't a dramatic gesture or a public declaration. It was a choice. Clear, honest, and irrevocable. For the first time, Ethan chose someone with his heart, not his logic. And by doing so, he began to choose himself too. Toronto after midnight has a rare kind of silence. The city lights are still on, reflected in the wet asphalt from light autumn rain. But footsteps have slowed, cars are scarce, and even the air seems to breathe more slowly. Ethan and Olivia walk through downtown together, still in formal attire, but far from the glitz and expectations of the event. He has taken off his jacket, his tie is in his pocket, and his shirt sleeves are rolled up. She carries her heels in one hand, walking barefoot on the sidewalk, laughing at her own boldness. "If someone takes a picture of me like this, I think I'll lose my license," she jokes, spinning slowly on her feet like she's dancing in slow motion. "Don't worry, I know lawyers," Ethan replies, with a smile lighter than he usually wears. They're not headed anywhere specific. They stroll without hurry, as if rediscovering the city on their own terms. They pass darkened shop windows, neon signs blinking red and blue, closed cafes, and the occasional solitary figure crossing the night. Olivia points at an old record store and says that if she had time, she'd learn to play piano. Ethan, surprised, admits that he once tried to learn the cello. It lasted 2 months, but I still remember the first note. They laugh. Not at failure, but at the humanity in it. At that hour, the city feels like a secret only they share. "You were different tonight," Olivia says. "More whole, happier." Maybe because, for the first time, I felt like I was in the right place. She looks at him. No smile, but full eyes. "You were brave. Not for what you said to your ex, but for what you allowed yourself to feel." Ethan takes a deep breath. He looks around as if trying to name the moment, then replies, almost in a whisper, "I spent years trying not to feel anything. I thought vulnerability was weakness. But you showed me something else." Olivia smiles now, softly, almost shyly. "You know what scared me most today?" she asks. "No. What?" "Receiving that award. Because I knew half of those people had no idea what goes on 1,000 kilometers from here. I knew they'd applaud me without listening, and I hate being a symbol of something no one wants to change. But you went up there anyway. Of course, because maybe the other half was listening." Ethan stops for a moment, looks at her with a depth that no longer requires words. He understands. More than he'd like to admit. And in that silence between them, something even more intimate reveals itself. Complicity. The feeling that they can carry the difficult parts of reality together without being crushed by them. They cross Yonge Street and walk toward a small park surrounded by tall trees, with wooden benches and dry leaves scattered on the ground. They sit side by side. Olivia rests her feet on the damp grass. Ethan watches the distant lights of the CN Tower. "Did you know I used to hate dinners like that?" he says after a while. "And now I might not hate them anymore. Not if you're there." She rests her head on his shoulder. He doesn't move. He simply closes his eyes for a moment, as if giving thanks, not to luck or fate, but to the courage of saying yes to something he couldn't predict. The city keeps breathing around them. Nothing extraordinary happens. No passionate kiss, no melodramatic declarations. Just 2 people sitting on a bench, sharing the most meaningful silence they've ever experienced. There, on that anonymous bench in a sleeping city, something new begins. Not because it was promised, but because it was felt. A beginning that doesn't need ceremony. Ethan smiles. And this time, there's no shadow behind it. It's the first in a long time that comes from within. Dawn in Toronto is slow, almost shy. The first rays of sun filter through the tall buildings, drawing soft shapes on concrete and glass facades. The streets are still empty, and the autumn chill clings to the ground, to foggy windows, to the fingertips of those who wake early. Ethan watches it all in silence, standing before the large window of his apartment, a mug of hot coffee in his hands. Beside him, still half asleep, hair loose over her shoulders, is Olivia. She yawns, stretches, and leans in, resting her chin on his shoulder. He doesn't move. He just smiles. A small gesture, but a definitive one. As if, in that simple touch, lies the confirmation of everything they've been building, step by step, without hurry, but with truth. They don't say much. They don't need to. The city outside begins to wake, with buses cutting through the drowsy traffic, cafes opening their doors, and newspapers landing on doorsteps. But inside, there's a good silence. An inhabited silence. Ethan finds himself observing his own thoughts. So much has changed in such a short time. He remembers himself just weeks ago, buried in spreadsheets, meetings, and decisions that once felt urgent, but don't anymore. He remembers the last time he fell in love and how he swore he wouldn't do it again. He remembers dinner with Olivia and the night at the museum. But above all, he remembers what he felt when he chose to stand up for her. Not as an impulsive gesture, but as an act of recognition. Recognizing in her what he had never dared to seek in himself: courage, surrender, purpose. He smiles again without realizing. Olivia notices. "What are you smiling about?" she asks, her voice still husky from sleep. "You, me, all of this." She tilts her head, intrigued. "This what? This life we didn't even know we wanted. And now makes perfect sense." She laughs, a quiet, sincere laugh, like someone who understands exactly what he means. Later they go for a walk. The city is already in full swing, but to them everything feels calmer, lighter. They stroll along the lakeshore, watch ducks on the mirrored water, share a croissant from a local bakery. Ethan holds her hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And now, it is. At a random bench in Harborfront Center, they sit down to rest. The sun hits Olivia's face, and she closes her eyes for a moment. Ethan watches her in silence, as if collecting that moment. There are no grand plans, no rush. But there is a simple certainty. He no longer wants to live far from this, far from her, far from himself. That morning, Ethan receives a message from Julian. A simple, "So, how was it?" with a suspicious face emoji. Ethan replies with just a photo. Him and Olivia, sitting on the bench, smiling, the lake in the background. No caption. Julian doesn't need anything more to understand. When they return home, Olivia sticks a note on the bathroom mirror. It's handwritten, in her rushed script. "Remember, the world still needs you, but only if you are whole." Ethan reads the note more than once. He smiles. He understands. Later, as night falls, the two of them watch the city from above. Toronto glows like a map of artificial constellations. Ethan wraps his arm around Olivia's shoulders. She rests her head on his chest, and a final phrase, spoken in a low voice by him, as if just for himself. "I'm so glad I had the courage to go to that dinner. I'm so glad it was you. Sometimes, all we need is one person to show us it's still possible to begin again." If you enjoyed this journey with Ethan and Olivia and believe, just like us, that new beginnings are possible, then you need to be part of our community. Welcome to Enchanting Stories, where every video is an invitation to get lost in stories that touch your heart, inspire you, and make us believe in the power of true connections. Subscribe to the channel because every day there are more stories that warm the heart. Leave a like because your thumbs up shows we're on the right track and helps more people find these tales. Comment down below and tell us, which magical city in the world are you watching us from? Who knows, you might find someone from your neighborhood in the comments. And hey, if you're already a true Enchanted fan, share the video with that friend who needs a little push to believe in love. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep believing. Every great story begins when we say yes to the unexpected.